My father left me nothing in his will. Then I found the secret he hid for 20 years. When 34-year-old Yasmaya Bennett returns home after her father's sudden death, she expects grief, family tension, and an uncomfortable reading of the will. Instead, she discovers that her father left almost everything to her older brother, Daniel. Maya has always been treated as the irresponsible daughter, the one who moved away, refused to join the family business, and supposedly abandoned everyone. But then an old attorney gives Maya one final envelope her father instructed him to deliver only after the will was read. Inside is a photograph, a bank receipt, and a handwritten message. If Daniel tells you I never trusted you, don't believe him. Maya begins uncovering a secret involving a missing family fortune, a decades-old betrayal, and the real reason her father pushed her away. But the deeper she digs, the more she realizes her father wasn't trying to punish her. He was trying to protect her. The day my father died, my brother hugged me in the hallway and whispered, "Don't make this harder than it already is." I thought he was talking about the funeral. I was wrong. 3 hours later, we sat around my father's dining table while his attorney read the will. My mother received the house. My brother received the family business. My younger sister received the lake property. And I received nothing. Not even the old watch my father had promised me when I was 12. Everyone stared at me. My brother looked almost sorry. Then the attorney cleared his throat and said, "There's one additional document Mr. Bennett instructed me to give Maya privately." My brother's face changed, and for the first time that entire week, he looked afraid. My name is Maya Bennett, and for most of my life, my family had one version of me. I was the difficult daughter, the stubborn one, the daughter who left. My brother Daniel was everything my father wanted in a son. He came home after college. He joined the family construction company. He married a woman my parents adored. He had 2 children, and whenever my father introduced him, he didn't say much. He didn't need to. Daniel was the success story. I was the warning. When I moved to Chicago at 23, my father told relatives I was going through a phase. When I refused to return and work for the family business, he called me selfish. And when I started my own small design company, he never asked how it was going. For 11 years, we lived in the same country, but almost completely separate lives. Then, on a rainy Tuesday morning in November, my mother called me. My father was dead. He had collapsed in his office. A heart attack. No warning, no final conversation, no goodbye. I drove 6 hours home through rain that never seemed to stop. When I arrived, the house looked exactly the same. The brick fireplace, the family photographs, my father's old leather chair, even the little brass clock on the mantel that had been 5 minutes slow for as long as I could remember. But there was something different. My photograph was gone. There had been one picture of me on that mantel since I was 18. It wasn't there anymore. I asked my mother about it. She looked at the empty space and said, "Your father probably moved it. That was all." At the funeral, Daniel stood beside my mother and accepted condolences like he had been preparing for the moment his entire life. Stayed in the back. Nobody asked me to speak. Nobody expected me to, and honestly, I was used to it. 2 days later, we gathered in my father's dining room for the reading of the will. His attorney, Harold Mason, sat at the head of the table. My mother was beside him. Daniel sat across from me. My sister Claire sat next to Daniel. I remember looking at the 4 of us and thinking how strange it was. We had grown up together, but somehow we had become strangers. Harold began reading. The house went to my mother. The company went to Daniel. The lake property went to Claire. Several investment accounts were divided between my siblings. Then Harold paused. He looked at me. Miss Bennet, your father made no financial bequest to you. Nobody spoke. I smiled. It was the kind of smile people use when they don't want others to know they've been hurt. That's okay, I said. Daniel leaned back. He looked relieved. Then Harold reached into his briefcase. But your father left this. He placed a small brown envelope on the table. My name was written across the front. Maya. In my father's handwriting, Daniel immediately said, Harold. Dad said the will was final. Harold looked at him. This isn't part of the will. What is it? A private instruction. Daniel stood. Maybe we should all see it. Harold shook his head. No, he looked directly at me. Your father specifically instructed me to give this to Maya after the will was read. Daniel's face became pale. I took the envelope. Inside was a photograph. Showed my father standing beside a man I didn't recognize. Behind them was a warehouse. On the back, my father's handwriting said, This is where everything started. There was also a bank receipt, 20 years old, and a handwritten note. I unfolded it. There were only 2 sentences. Maya, if you're reading this, Daniel has already told you I never trusted you. He is lying. I looked across the table. Daniel was staring at the note. What's that? He asked. I didn't answer. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in my brother's eyes. That night, I couldn't sleep. At 2:17 in the morning, I went downstairs. My father's office door was locked. It had never been locked before. I found an old key in the drawer beneath the staircase. It opened the door. Inside, everything looked untouched. His desk, his books, his old computer, the framed photograph of our family. I began searching. I didn't know what I was looking for. Then, I noticed something strange. One section of the bookshelf had fresh scratches on the wooden floor. I pushed the shelf. It moved. Behind. It was a narrow compartment. Inside were 3 folders. The first was labeled 2004. The second said Bennett Construction. The third had my name. I opened mine. The first page contained my college application. The second contained letters from my father. Letters I'd never received. I read the first one. Maya, I'm sorry I couldn't tell you why I pushed you away. The next line stopped me. Your brother knows what happened. I kept reading. 20 years earlier, my father's construction company had nearly collapsed. Someone had been stealing money, thousands of dollars. My father discovered the theft, but before he could report it, the person responsible threatened to destroy the company. My father didn't identify the person in the letter. He only wrote one sentence. Protected the wrong child. I heard footsteps outside the office. I quickly closed the folder. The door opened. Daniel stood there. Neither of us spoke. Finally he said, You shouldn't be in here. I held up the folder. Why didn't Dad leave me anything? Daniel stared at me. You got the message. That's all that matters. What message? He looked away. Then he said, Dad wanted you gone. I shook my head. He wrote that you were lying. Daniel's expression changed. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he whispered, You have no idea what you're digging into. He walked out. I followed him. Daniel! He stopped at the bottom of the stairs. 20 years ago, I said. What happened? He turned around, and he finally told me. But not the truth. He said our father had discovered an accounting mistake. He said Daniel had been blamed. He said my father had covered it up to protect the family. Then he looked at me and said, "Dad spent the rest of his life regretting what he did." I almost believed him, almost, until the next morning. Harold Mason called me. He told me to come to his office alone. When I arrived, he closed the door. Then he placed another file on his desk. "This is what your father didn't want your brother to know I had." Inside was a copy of an old police report and a photograph. The same warehouse from my father's envelope. But this photograph was taken 20 years earlier. There were two people standing outside, my father and Daniel. I looked at Harold. "What happened there?" He took a long breath. "Your father discovered that Daniel had been secretly transferring company money into an account controlled by someone outside the business." "Why?" "Because Daniel owed someone." "Who?" Harold slid another page toward me. A name was circled. Victor Hale. I knew the name. Everyone in our town did. Victor had been involved in organized financial fraud years ago. But the worst part wasn't the money. It was what happened afterward. My father had planned to report Daniel. Then Victor threatened him. He told my father that if Daniel went to prison, someone would come after the family. So my father made a terrible choice. He covered it up, but he also made another choice. He quietly moved money into an account in my name. Not stolen money, legitimate company shares. He had been building something for me for 20 years. Harold opened the final document. It was a trust. My name was on it. The value was enormous. I stared at him. Why didn't he tell me? Because he believed Daniel would take it from you. I felt sick. The will wasn't punishment. It was bait. My father had deliberately left Daniel control of the company because Daniel believed that meant he had won. But the company had one final condition. If Daniel sold it, transferred ownership, or attempted to access the protected trust without my approval, the entire business would be frozen. My father had built the trap 20 years earlier, and Daniel had walked straight into it. That afternoon, Daniel came to my apartment. He didn't knock. He simply walked in. "You know," he said. I looked at him. Yes, he sat down. For the first time in my life, my brother looked exhausted. "I was going to fix it," he said. "You stole from Dad. I was 19. You lied for 20 years. I was scared. And Dad?" Daniel looked down. "He never forgave me." I waited. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. He didn't trust me enough to give me the company. I stared at him. "He gave you the company." "No." Daniel laughed bitterly. "He gave me the responsibility of destroying myself." Then he told me the rest. My father had known he was dying. He had spent his final year putting everything into place. The letters, the trust, the evidence, the conditions, and the envelope. He knew Daniel would try to control the family after his death. He knew Daniel would assume I had been forgotten, and he knew that was the only way to make Daniel reveal himself. I asked the question that mattered most. "Why didn't Dad just tell me?" Daniel looked at me. "Because he knew you'd forgive me." I couldn't speak. That was the part that hurt the most. My father hadn't hidden the truth because he didn't love me. He had hidden it because he knew exactly who I was. He knew I'd spent my whole life trying to keep peace. Even when peace cost me. A month later, Daniel signed an agreement transferring control of the company. The investigation into the old financial fraud was reopened. Victor Hale was already serving another sentence by then. My father was gone. Daniel and I weren't suddenly close. Life doesn't work that way. 20 years of lies don't disappear because someone finally tells the truth. But something changed. I stopped trying to earn my family's approval. I stopped explaining why I left. I stopped apologizing for building a life they didn't understand. And one spring morning, I went back to my father's house. My mother opened the door. She didn't say anything. She simply stepped aside. I walked into the living room, and there, above the fireplace, was my photograph. The one from when I was 18. My mother had put it back. Underneath it was a small handwritten card. I recognized my father's handwriting immediately. It said, "My daughter was never the failure. I was simply too afraid to tell her why." I stood there for a long time. Then I cried. Not because I had finally received an inheritance. Not because Daniel had been exposed, but because after 20 years, I finally knew the truth. My father had never forgotten me. He had been protecting me in the only way he knew how. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't fair, and it didn't erase the years we'd lost. But it gave me something I had wanted since I was 23. An answer. Sometimes the people who hurt us aren't always trying to destroy us. Sometimes they are afraid. Sometimes they make terrible choices. And sometimes the truth waits quietly until we're finally strong enough to hear it. If you've ever been treated like the Yotze, family disappointment, only to discover that there was another side to the story, tell me about it in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, subscribe. For more emotional family stories where the truth doesn't stay hidden forever.